The call came on a cold, gray morning. It was an unexpected call, but it was an unexpected invitation. My phone buzzed, and there at the top of the screen was Claire's name. I hadn't spoken to her in months, and certainly hadn't expected to hear from her now. The last time we'd crossed paths was at the company's annual retreat, when her husband, Daniel, had given one of his usual charismatic speeches about innovation and leadership. I'd nodded politely, but Daniel and I had never been close, more like acquaintances through work. So, when Claire's voice broke through the static on the other end, I was taken aback. "Hi, it's Claire." Wanted to ask if you could attend Daniel's funeral. I know it's last minute, but it would mean a lot if you could be there." There was something in her voice, an undertone that struck me as odd. It wasn't grief. It wasn't the trembling voice of a woman who had just lost her partner. It was controlled, calculated, even. I hesitated. "Of course, Claire. I didn't even know about the funeral." "How did?" she interrupted, her voice suddenly tight. "I understand. You probably didn't know. But please, it's really important to me. I'll send you the details." Before I could respond, she hung up. That was it. I stared at the phone in my hand, confusion swirling in my mind. Why would Claire want me there? I was just a colleague. The invitation felt more like an obligation than an invitation, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than she was letting on. A few days later, I found myself driving to the funeral home, the sky above bleak and overcast. The coldness of the morning mirrored the heaviness in my chest. I had known Daniel in passing, more through the countless meetings and emails than actual conversation. But his death had shaken everyone at the company. He had been the face of our success, the kind of leader who inspired loyalty with his charm and decisiveness. So why was I here? When I arrived at the funeral, the place was already crowded with mourners, most of whom I didn't recognize. A sea of black coats, somber faces, and hushed whispers filled the room. As I walked in, I scanned the crowd for Claire. She stood at the front, her posture impeccable, her face a mask of composure, not a tear in sight. For a moment, I wondered if I was looking at the same woman who had called me just days earlier. I took my seat in the back, near the middle, watching her closely. She wasn't speaking to anyone. Instead, she just stood there, her eyes distant. Every now and then, she would glance in my direction. It felt deliberate, like she was waiting for something. It didn't feel like a typical funeral. There was an underlying tension in the air that I couldn't quite place. The service began, but the words from the preacher seemed to fade as I watched Claire. Something in her gaze felt unsettling, as if she was trying to communicate something without saying a word. After the service, as people slowly made their way out of the chapel, I caught her eyes again. She held my gaze for a moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I walked up to her afterward. Maybe a simple exchange of condolences, maybe a conversation about Daniel. But instead, Claire looked at me, her voice quiet but urgent. "I need you to stay after everyone leaves," she said, her tone low and controlled. I blinked. "What? Stay? Claire, I know it's strange, but please, it's important. You're the only one who can help." Her words hung in the air like an unanswered question. The funeral felt less like a farewell and more like the beginning of something. Something I couldn't understand but was now a part of. I nodded, not entirely sure why, but knowing that somehow staying felt like the only option. As the last few people filtered out, Claire led me to the side, away from the crowd. She gave one last glance toward the entrance before closing the door to a small side room, one I'd never seen before. She locked it behind us, her eyes never leaving mine. "You have to trust me," she said, her voice suddenly intense. "There's something you need to see. Something Daniel wanted you to know." I felt a strange chill in my bones as she moved toward a desk, rummaging through a drawer. Her movements were quick, almost frantic. She finally pulled out an envelope, the edges worn, as if it had been handled countless times. I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Whatever was about to happen was not just about Daniel's death. Something was wrong, something deeper than I could have imagined. And as I stood there, watching Claire prepare to reveal what she had been holding back, I knew I was about to be drawn into a web that I would have no way of escaping. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing out the sound of the world beyond. I looked around the room, the smell of polished wood and old leather mingling with the lingering scent of flowers from the funeral. Claire stood in front of me, holding the envelope like it was something fragile, something that could shatter with the wrong movement. I wasn't sure what she meant by something Daniel wanted me to know. The envelope was unmarked, no clue as to its contents or significance. It felt weighty, like it was carrying the secrets of a man I thought I knew. Except now, I wasn't sure I did. "You need to understand," Claire said, her voice breaking through my thoughts. Daniel, he was worried. He was always worried about what was happening behind closed doors at the company. He had a plan, one he never got to finish. And now, I'm afraid it's too late for him. I could barely process her words. I had always known Daniel to be confident, decisive. Nothing seemed to rattle him. But this was something entirely different. She seemed frantic, her fingers trembling as she slid the envelope across the table toward me. For a moment, I just stared at it. I didn't know what I expected, but this wasn't it. It wasn't grief. It wasn't closure. It was something darker. Daniel was scared, she continued, as if reading my thoughts. He knew things that could destroy everything. My mind raced. I tried to make sense of it, but nothing clicked. "What do you mean? What kind of things?" She hesitated. Her eyes flickered to the door as if she feared someone might overhear. He knew the company was built on corruption, embezzlement, fraud, but he was going to expose it. He had evidence, enough to bring everyone down. And then, her voice faltered. Then he died. And I don't think it was an accident. The words hit me like a slap. Daniel, the man I had worked alongside for years, the man everyone trusted and looked up to, had known about criminal activity at the highest levels of the company. It didn't seem possible. Yet, as I looked at Claire's face, tense, drained, desperate, I couldn't deny the sincerity in her eyes. Before I could respond, she gestured toward the envelope. This is the evidence. He left it for you. He said you were the only one who could be trusted with it. My throat tightened. What had I got myself into? I had always kept my distance from office drama, content to do my job and go home. But now, it seemed I had been drawn into something far more dangerous, something that could ruin lives, not just Daniel's, but my own as well. I took a slow breath, reached for the envelope, and slid it open. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper neatly folded, with a few lines written in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. The message was brief, almost cryptic. "If you're reading this, then something's gone terribly wrong. There are people within the company who are not who they seem. People I trusted, people you may trust, are involved in things that will destroy everything we've worked for. They are willing to kill to keep it quiet. Watch your back. Trust no one but her." I stared at the note for a long moment. The words blurred as my mind spun. I knew what they meant, but I didn't want to admit it. This wasn't just about corporate greed. It was about something much more insidious. People had died for it, and now I was tangled up in it. "Who is her?" I asked, my voice tight, uncertain. Claire's face turned pale, and she took a deep breath. "It's me. He trusted me. He knew I would make sure it got into the right hands. He said you would understand." I didn't understand. Not yet, anyway. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Daniel's death was no accident. Someone had silenced him. Someone who didn't want the truth to come out. Claire sat down slowly, her face a study in exhaustion. "You need to help me. We have to expose what's happening. But we can't do it alone. I don't know who we can trust anymore." I glanced at the envelope again, then back at her. "Why me, Claire? Why did you call me, of all people?" Her eyes held a mixture of fear and resolve. "Because Daniel said you were the only one who could handle it. The only one who could get it to the right people. He didn't trust anyone else." The weight of the moment pressed down on me. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I couldn't turn back now. The path ahead was treacherous, and there were forces at play that I couldn't fully comprehend. But one thing was clear. Daniel's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning. Okay, I said, finally meeting her gaze. Let's figure out what we need to do. As I spoke the words, I knew I had crossed a line. There was no turning back from this. I was in the middle of the storm. It was only just beginning. The room felt suffocating, like the air was thick with unspoken truths. I stood there, trying to digest everything Claire had just told me, but it felt impossible. My brain refused to make sense of it all. Daniel, a man I had known for years, worked with closely, had been hiding something that big. He had uncovered corruption at the highest levels, enough to bring the whole company to its knees. And now he was dead. Claire's voice broke through my thoughts. You don't understand yet. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't help him when he needed me most. But you can still make things right. You have to. Her words were urgent, almost frantic. I swallowed hard. What do you want me to do, Claire? I barely knew the guy. I don't even know where to start. She shook her head, her eyes wild. It's not about knowing him. It's about knowing what he was about to do. The people involved. They'll do anything to cover this up. But Daniel knew how dangerous they were. He made preparations. He left us a trail. You just need to follow it. Her hands trembled as she picked up a small black box from the desk. This is what he wanted you to have. It's a recording device, a digital recorder. Daniel used it to gather evidence. Everything he recorded, every conversation he had with the people at the company, is on here. I reached out and took the recorder from her. Its weight in my palm almost too much to bear. How could this small, inconspicuous device hold the evidence that could tear apart everything Daniel had worked for? How could it hold the key to solving a murder? The truth, I realized, was not as simple as it seemed. If Daniel had been killed because of what he knew, then I had just stepped into the line of fire by agreeing to help Claire. I could already feel the weight of it, the responsibility, the fear, the danger. Are you sure about this? I asked, my voice low. I mean, we're talking about something huge here. Do you really want to go down this path? Claire nodded, but her expression was steely. I don't have a choice anymore. They'll come for me next if I don't expose them. And if they don't get to me, they'll come for you, too. It's too late to turn back. The words were chilling. The truth was that we were already too far in. There was no retreat now. I had to keep moving forward, no matter the risk. Without another word, Claire led me toward the back of the room, where a small window overlooked the backyard. We stood in silence for a moment, both of us processing the gravity of what was happening. Outside, I could see the remnants of the funeral. Flowers, candles, and the somber remnants of a day that was supposed to offer closure. But for Claire, it was only the beginning. I turned to her. What happens now? What do we do with this recorder? Her expression darkened. We need to find the people who were involved. Daniel's recordings have their names, their faces, everything. But we can't trust anyone we know. Not the company, not the police. They're all compromised. You have to find someone outside the system. Someone who can take this and make it public. I nodded, the reality of the situation settling in like a weight on my chest. We were in too deep, but there was no turning back. Daniel had trusted me with this. And if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that I couldn't let his death be in vain. We'll go through the recordings, I said, my voice steady despite the storm swirling inside me. We'll find who's involved, and we'll bring them down. Claire's eyes softened, but only for a moment. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. The words hung in the air, but they didn't deter me. They only made me more certain. As I left the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just about exposing corruption. This was personal. Someone had killed Daniel to keep their secret safe, and I would do whatever it took to make sure they paid for it. I didn't sleep much that night. Claire gave me the recorder, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just become irrevocably entangled in something far bigger than I could understand. I spent hours pacing my apartment, listening to the recordings over and over again. Each conversation Daniel had captured on that small, unassuming device only deepened the mystery. The voices of people I thought I knew well, executives, colleagues, board members, now sounded sinister, their words veiled in promises of money and power. They spoke freely, unaware that they were being recorded. It was a different world, a world I wasn't a part of, or at least that's what I had always thought. The company I had worked for, the people I trusted, were not what they seemed. This wasn't just corporate corruption. This was something darker, something that could destroy everything if exposed. By morning, I had barely managed to piece together what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't do this alone. I needed Claire. She knew more than I did, and her desperation was the only thing that seemed to hold any kind of direction in this mess. I called her early, and when she picked up, her voice was a low whisper, as if she was afraid someone might overhear. "Are you okay?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. "I'm fine," I said, though the weight of it all was beginning to settle in. "But I need to see you. We need to talk about these recordings. I don't understand half of what I'm hearing." "Come over," she replied, and I could hear the faintest edge of urgency in her words. "There's more I need to show you. It's not just the recordings. There's a room, Daniel's room. It's hidden, and I never told anyone about it. But you need to see it. A hidden room." I had no idea what she meant, but her tone told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't just about the evidence. There was something else buried beneath the surface, something even deeper than the corruption Daniel had uncovered. And now it was calling me in, pulling me into its depths. I agreed to meet her, and less than an hour later, I found myself standing in front of her house again. The funeral had come and gone, but the atmosphere felt heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Claire let me in without a word, her eyes scanning the street before she closed the door behind me. "Follow me," she said quietly, leading me to the back of the house, to a small, narrow hallway that I hadn't noticed before. It led to a door, just a plain, wooden door that blended in with the rest of the house. But there was something about it that made my heart race. Claire's hand hovered over the doorknob before she finally turned it, her eyes darting to mine. "This room," she whispered, almost to herself. "Daniel wanted you to see it, but I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, not even the police. He said it was too dangerous." I nodded, my stomach turning. Whatever was inside this room, it was more than just hidden evidence. It was a secret that could change everything. She opened the door slowly, revealing a space that looked nothing like the rest of the house. It was small and cramped, barely lit by a single desk lamp in the corner. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with files, books, and boxes. But what caught my eye immediately was a large, reinforced metal safe in the corner. "That's where it is," Claire said, her voice strained. "Everything. The rest of the evidence." Daniel was careful. He never trusted anyone with it. Not even me, not until the end. I stepped forward, my eyes drawn to the safe. It was old, covered in dust, and locked tight. But there was something about it that felt final, like whatever was inside would be the last piece of the puzzle. Claire moved toward it, her fingers trembling as she pulled out a small key from her pocket. It was silver, simple, nothing special. But as she unlocked the safe, I realized just how much this room represented. This was the culmination of everything Daniel had been working on, and everything that had led to his death. It was more than just the corruption. It was the moment where everything would change. The safe door creaked open, and Claire reached inside, pulling out a stack of folders and a few small boxes. She set them on the desk in front of me, her hands shaking. "Look at these," she said, her voice breaking. "These are the final pieces. The last things Daniel had before it happened." I opened the first folder, my hands unsteady. Inside was a set of financial documents, bank statements, spreadsheets, invoices, each one a damning piece of evidence. But what struck me were the names listed across them. People I knew, people I worked with, executives I had trusted. But there was something else hidden in the files. A series of photographs. Grainy black and white images of meetings, of people sitting at a table, of faces I recognized but had never seen in this context before. Claire was in some of the photos, though her face was always turned away, as if she was trying to remain unnoticed. But Daniel wasn't just a bystander. He was in the middle of everything. "I didn't know what he was really involved in," Claire said, her voice thick with guilt. "I thought I was just helping him with the finances. But he was collecting everything. All the pieces. and he was going to expose them all. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. Daniel had known. He had known everything. And now, it was up to us to finish what he started. Claire looked at me, her eyes pleading, "I don't know how to do this alone. I'm scared. I thought you were the one who could help him. But now," she paused, her voice trembling, "now I don't know who I can trust." I closed the folder and looked at her. "We'll finish this. For him. For everyone." I didn't know what I was getting into, but in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking away. Not now. Not after seeing what was in that room. The morning after Claire and I uncovered Daniel's hidden room felt surreal. The weight of what we found still pressed on me. But now there was no denying the truth. Daniel had known something far darker than I had ever imagined. There was no question now. His death wasn't a random tragedy. It was part of a larger story, one I was now unwillingly entangled in. Claire had insisted we take the evidence to the police, but there was no way I could trust them. Not anymore. The recordings, the documents. Everything had pointed to the fact that the corruption ran deeper than we had thought, and we couldn't risk exposing it to the wrong people. "We can't go to the police." "Not yet," I said, my voice low as we sat across from each other in our kitchen, the morning sun barely touching the countertops. "We need to find someone who's not connected to this. Someone we can trust." Claire frowned, rubbing her temples as if the stress of the situation was beginning to take its toll. "I get it, but who? We don't exactly have many options at this point." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stack of documents on the table between us. It felt like the weight of the world had shifted, and now it was my turn to carry it. "I think I know someone," I said, my mind already racing through possible contacts. "There's a journalist, Catherine Langley. She works for a small investigative outlet. She's been sniffing around the company for a while, asking questions about irregularities in the financials. She could help us. But we don't know if we can trust her either," Claire finished for me, her voice strained. "We don't know if anyone can be trusted anymore." It was the truth. The further we dug, the more I realized that the very people I'd worked alongside for years were not who they appeared to be. The company was a house of cards. And with each new piece of evidence, it felt like it could collapse at any moment. I exhaled sharply, reaching for my phone. "We don't have a choice. We'll meet with her and see where it goes. But we have to be careful. If she's in on it, if she's somehow tied to the people who killed Daniel, then we'll have to go back to the drawing board." Claire nodded, though I could see the doubt in her eyes. "How do we even know she'll help us? If she's investigating the company, she's already got her own agenda. We can't afford to get distracted." I knew she was right. We had to be cautious. The truth we were chasing wasn't just dangerous. It was life-threatening. But if Catherine Langley was a key to exposing the company's secrets, then she was the only person we could turn to. After a tense silence, I finally hit send on the message, asking Catherine if she was available to meet. Her response came quickly, and we set up a meeting for that afternoon. I could feel my pulse quicken. It was a risk, but it was the only lead we had. When we arrived at the small cafe where we were supposed to meet Catherine, I felt exposed. The bright lights, the soft clinking of coffee cups, and the chatter of strangers around us only made it more difficult to focus. My eyes kept scanning the room, searching for any sign that we were being watched. Claire sat across from me, her hand clasped tightly around her cup as we waited. It wasn't long before a woman walked in. She was dressed in a dark blazer and jeans, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her eyes scanned the room, and I could feel the tension in her movements as she made her way over to our table. "Catherine Langley?" I asked, standing as she approached. She nodded, offering a tight smile. "You must be the people who have the evidence. Daniel's files." I could tell she wasn't here for small talk. There was something sharp in her gaze, a calculating edge that told me she was already 2 steps ahead of us. "Please sit," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. "We need to talk about what we found." She took a seat, folding her hands neatly on the table. "I'm listening." I exchanged a glance with Claire, then slid the stack of documents toward Catherine. This is everything Daniel had gathered. He was going to expose something big. something that could bring down the entire company. But we need your help to make sure it gets to the right people. Catherine didn't reach for the papers immediately. Instead, she studied us with a cool, discerning look. How do I know you're not just trying to set me up? How do I know this isn't some kind of trap? I met her gaze, my voice steady. Because we're in the same boat. We don't want anything from you except your help. We want this to go public. And we want justice for Daniel. Her eyes narrowed, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then, without warning, she reached for the documents, flipping through them quickly, scanning the contents. A small, surprised gasp escaped her lips as she read through some of the financial statements. This is huge, she murmured. If this is real, it could bring down more than just the company. It could take down people in high places, politicians, financiers. It's a network. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. That's why we need your help. You've been investigating them, right? You've been asking questions about the company. Do you have the connections to make this public? Catherine set the papers down and looked directly at me. I can make it public, but there's a catch. I can't go after this alone. I'll need backup, protection. Whoever is behind this, they'll come after me if they know I'm involved. I felt the tension in the air shift. This wasn't just about getting the truth out. It was about survival. Whoever was behind Daniel's death wasn't going to let us expose them without a fight. We'll help you, Claire said, her voice unwavering. Whatever it takes. Catherine's eyes flickered between the two of us, weighing the decision. Finally, she nodded. All right, let's do this. But you need to understand there's no going back. Once we start, there's no way to stop it. And with those words, the hunt for the truth began. The next few days blurred together in a whirlwind of secrecy and adrenaline. Catherine Langley, the journalist we had brought into this mess, was relentless. She moved quickly, making connections, leveraging her contacts, and preparing the story for release. But with every step she took, the danger escalated. We were no longer just dealing with corporate corruption. We were up against an intricate network of powerful individuals who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. Claire and I met with Catherine several times, each time in different locations, out of sight, away from prying eyes. The weight of the evidence we had, the files, the recordings, it felt like a ticking time bomb, and we were running out of time to make our move. Catherine was determined to break the story, but even she knew how much was at stake. We can't afford to be reckless, she warned us one evening, her voice low as we gathered in a dimly lit restaurant. If we push too hard, too fast, they'll notice. They already know we're onto something. But right now, they're still unaware of how deep we've dug. The last thing we want is for them to know we're ready to expose them. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Then what do? We can't just sit here and wait for them to make the first move. Catherine looked at both of us, her gaze sharp. We wait, but we don't stop gathering information. We track their movements, listen for cracks in the armor. But we need leverage. If we have something they need, something that forces them to act before we release the full story, that's when we strike. Claire, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. So, what exactly are we waiting for? What's our leverage? Catherine smiled, a cold, knowing smile. The missing pieces. Daniel didn't just gather financial records. He knew something else, something bigger. He was close to uncovering it. There's a man, someone who works at the company. His name is Mark Easton, and he's involved in all of this. He's a middleman, the kind of guy who makes sure everything stays under wraps. If we get to him, we'll have the last piece of the puzzle. I felt a chill run down my spine. You want us to go after him? Catherine nodded. Not directly. We have to be smart about this. Mark's a ghost. He doesn't leave a trail, and he's dangerous. But I have a contact who can get us to him. Someone who's been watching him for a while. This was it. The first real lead. If we could get to Mark Easton, we would have the leverage Catherine talked about. But the thought of getting involved with someone as shady as him made my stomach churn. Everything about the situation felt like we were sinking deeper into quicksand. But Claire wasn't backing down. How do we make sure we're not walking into a trap? We won't. I've worked with this contact before. He's clean. And if we play our cards right, we can get Easton to spill everything he knows. He's the key to exposing the network. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. This wasn't just about bringing down a company anymore. It was about survival. Mark Easton wasn't just a cog in the machine. He was one of the gears that kept it all turning. If we could take him down, we might finally have a chance. The next few days were tense. We met with Catherine's contact, a man named Liam, who was as mysterious as he was resourceful. He was an ex-cop, now working as an independent investigator, and his connections ran deep in the underworld. He promised us he could get us close to Mark Easton, but he warned that once we were in, there was no going back. Easton's got eyes everywhere. Liam told us as we sat in his dingy office late one night, "You go near him, and you better be ready to deal with the consequences. I'll get you the intel you need, but after that, you're on your own." I looked at Claire, who nodded silently. We were in too deep now to back out. Mark Easton was our next step, and if we could get him talking, we might finally have enough to expose everything. We spent the next few days gathering intel, using Liam's connections to track Easton's every move. We learned that he frequently met with powerful figures in hidden locations, discussing deals, coordinating cover-ups. His role was clear. He was a fixer, someone who made problems disappear. But he was also a man with secrets, and secrets had a way of coming to light. Catherine had a plan. She'd been in contact with a few insiders of the company, and one of them had given her a lead. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A meeting was scheduled. Easton would be meeting a few of his associates at a remote location. It was our chance to confront him, to get the answers we needed. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the events of the past few days. The funeral, the hidden room, the deadly game we were now part of. And now, we were about to confront one of the key players in a conspiracy that could bring down an entire network of powerful people. I knew it was risky. I knew the consequences could be deadly. But I also knew we couldn't stop now. This was our only shot. I sat at the table with Claire, my fingers drumming nervously against the wood. Are we really ready for this? I asked quietly. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she stared out the window, her face pale in the dim light. "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is the only way to make sure Daniel's death wasn't for nothing." And with that, we were ready. The meeting with Mark Easton was set. Catherine's contact had given us the details, and everything was lined up for our confrontation. We had one chance to take him down, one chance to extract the truth before the network realized we were closing in on them. If we failed, we'd become targets, and there would be no turning back. The location was a nondescript building on the outskirts of town, an abandoned warehouse that had been converted into an underground meeting space for people who preferred to stay off the grid. Catherine, Claire, and I arrived separately, using different routes to avoid being followed. We had no idea who might be watching us, and every decision felt like a gamble. As we approached the warehouse, the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. The streets around us were eerily quiet, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel under our feet. It was too quiet. Everything about this felt wrong, but we had no choice but to move forward. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, the high ceilings casting long shadows that made the place feel even more desolate. Liam, Catherine's contact, was already there, waiting near the back of the room, his figure barely visible in the darkness. When he saw us, he gave a small nod and motioned for us to approach. "This is it," Liam said, his voice low. "Easton will be here soon. I'll stay in the shadows. Watch for any signs of trouble. You, too, stay focused. Don't make a move until you have him talking. If he bolts or tries to run, you'll lose him." I nodded, my heart racing in my chest. This was the moment. We had everything we needed, but we still didn't know how far Easton would go to protect himself. Would he confess, or would he try to cover his tracks? Either way, we had to be prepared for anything. It wasn't long before we heard the sound of a car pulling up outside, followed by the heavy thud of doors opening. Footsteps echoed through the warehouse, growing louder with each passing second. My pulse quickened. This was it. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and Mark Easton stepped inside, flanked by two men who were clearly there for protection. Easton was tall, his face sharp and angular, with an air of quiet confidence that screamed authority. He wasn't a man who took kindly to surprises, and I knew he had to play this carefully. The moment his eyes landed on us, his expression hardened. He'd obviously been briefed about the meeting, but I could see the suspicion in his gaze. He didn't trust us, and he definitely didn't trust Catherine. "Langley," he said, his voice smooth, almost bored. "I assume you're the one who's been poking around my business. What is this? A warning or an invitation?" Catherine didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her voice steady. "This is neither, Mark. This is your opportunity to tell us the truth before we make it public." Easton's eyes flicked toward Claire and then me, narrowing as if sizing us up. "You think you've got something I'm afraid of? You think you can just waltz in here and start making demands?" I took a step forward, my voice steady but firm. "We got everything, Easton. The financials, the recordings, the photos, everything Daniel had before he died. We know you're involved in the cover-ups. It's just a matter of time before we take this public. So the question is, are you going to help us or make this harder than it has to be?" For a long moment, Easton didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at us, his face unreadable. Then he chuckled, a low, menacing sound that seemed to echo off the walls of the warehouse. "You really have no idea what you're dealing with, do you?" he said, taking a step closer. "You're playing a dangerous game. You think I'm the one you need to worry about? Think again. There are far bigger forces at play here than you could ever imagine. If you want to survive this, you'll need to do a lot more than threaten me." I could feel the tension in the room shift. Easton wasn't just an obstacle. He was the gatekeeper to something far worse, a man who could either be the key to exposing everything or the one who could bury us all. "You don't scare me, Easton," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We already have what we need. You're the one who's running out of options." His smile faded, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. He knew we weren't bluffing. "Fine," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You want the truth? You want to know why I do what I do? It's simple: survival. The people I work for, they don't care about you or your little story. But they do care about one thing: control. And if you think you're going to expose them, you've made a grave mistake." He paused, his gaze flicking toward Liam, who was standing in the shadows, watching us carefully. Easton seemed to make a decision then, his expression shifting from annoyance to something darker. "I'll tell you this much. The people behind this, behind Daniel's death, are connected to more than just a company. They have ties to government officials, to organized crime, to people who can make you disappear without a trace. So if you're serious about this, you'd better be prepared to lose everything." His words hung in the air, thick with the weight of the threat he'd just issued. I could feel the chill run down my spine as I realized just how deep we were in. We weren't just taking down a company. We were unraveling a web of power that stretched far beyond what we had anticipated. But we couldn't back down now. Not after everything we had seen, everything we had lost. Catherine stepped forward, her voice steady but fierce. "You think we're afraid of you? You're wrong. We have the proof. We have everything, and we're not going to stop. If you want to make this about survival, fine. But don't think for a second that you can intimidate us into backing off." Easton's eyes flickered with something cold, something dangerous. "You'll regret this," he muttered, turning on his heel and walking toward the door. His men followed, their footsteps heavy as they left us standing there, the weight of his warning still echoing in the air. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence was deafening, filled with the realization that we had just made a powerful enemy. But it was too late to turn back now. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. The days following our confrontation with Mark Easton were filled with uncertainty. We knew we had pushed him into a corner, but we also knew the threat he had issued wasn't an idle one. Every phone call, every knock at the door made my pulse spike, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching. The walls had closed in, and now there was no way out except through. Catherine, Claire, and I kept in close contact, but we were careful, too careful. We knew that one wrong move could tip off the people who were hunting us, so we kept our meetings sporadic, using encrypted messages and burner phones to communicate. Our only option now was to move fast, and that meant putting everything we had into one final push. The evidence was overwhelming. The files, the recordings, and the network of connections that Daniel had documented. If we released it all at once, it would send shockwaves through the system. But with the stakes this high, we had to ensure we had the perfect strategy. Catherine had been working nonstop, using her contacts to secure a safe outlet for the information. But it wasn't just about exposing the corruption. It was about making sure that whoever was behind this would never hurt anyone again. We met late one night in a small, nondescript apartment. The windows were covered with blackout curtains, and the air smelled faintly of stale coffee. Catherine was at her laptop, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, as she sifted through the final pieces of the puzzle. Claire and I sat across from her, waiting for the moment when we could finally pull the trigger. "This is it," Catherine said quietly, clicking the final document into place. "I have everything I need. The story is ready to go live." There was no triumph in her voice, just a weight of decision that had taken too long to come. I could see the exhaustion on her face, the toll this whole ordeal had taken on her. But we had no time for second thoughts. We had waited too long, and now, every minute mattered. "We need to get this out to as many people as possible," I said, my throat dry. "The longer we wait, the more chance they'll find us first." Claire nodded, her fingers drumming anxiously on the table. "But once it's out there, we're exposed. There's no going back. They'll come after us with everything they have." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "But we don't have a choice anymore. This isn't just about saving ourselves. It's about everything Daniel died for. It's about making sure that those who are behind this don't destroy anyone else." Catherine leaned back in her chair, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She hesitated, but only for a moment. Then, without another word, she hit send. The story went live. The effect was instantaneous. Within minutes, our phones began to buzz nonstop. First, it was a trickle, journalists and news outlets reaching out, confirming details, asking for comments. But then the floodgates opened. Social media exploded, with thousands of people sharing the story, demanding answers. The hashtags trended within hours. The media had been waiting for a story like this, and now they had it. But with every new notification, the fear deepened. We knew the people we were up against weren't going to sit idly by. They would retaliate. They would come for us. And as the story continued to spread like wildfire, it was clear we had just started a fight we couldn't finish alone. We were on the run now, scrambling to stay ahead of the storm we had unleashed. But we couldn't stop, not when so many people's lives were on the line. A week later, Catherine received an anonymous email, a message encrypted with a code we couldn't crack. It was a warning, one that we should have expected, but it sent a chill through all of us. The email contained one simple message: "You've crossed the line. There's no escape." I could hear Catherine sharp and take a breath as she read the message aloud. Her fingers trembled as she closed the laptop. "It's happening. They know. They're coming for us." It was the confirmation we had feared. Our lives had just become a game of survival, a game with no rules. But we had come too far to stop now. The following days were a blur of close calls, hiding in plain sight, and carefully planned movements. We never stayed in one place too long, always on the move. But no matter how far we ran, it felt like we were always one step behind the people who were hunting us. Every shadow seemed to hold danger, and every phone call was a potential trap. But then, just as we were about to give in to the overwhelming fear that had been building for weeks, a twist of fate turned the tide in our favor. One night, while we were holed up in a safe house, a knock came at the door. It was unexpected, and for a moment, none of us moved. We had learned to be cautious, especially when it came to surprises. I peered through the peephole, my heart pounding. It wasn't one of the men who had been after us. Instead, it was someone we hadn't expected, Liam. He was standing there, looking tense but determined. "I have a way out," Liam said as he stepped inside, his voice low. "But we need to move quickly." "What are you talking about?" Claire asked, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean, a way out?" Liam glanced around, making sure no one was following him before he explained. "I have a contact. Someone who can get you out of the country, somewhere safe. But it's a one-way ticket. No going back. We exchanged looks, each of us weighing the decision. It wasn't easy. We had spent everything on exposing the truth, but the threat was real. And if we stayed, it wouldn't just be our lives at risk. It would be everyone we cared about. "We don't have much time," Lee emerged, his eyes darting toward a window, where the faint sound of approaching cars could be heard. I turned to Claire and Catherine. They were both silent, but I could see the fear in their eyes. We had all lost so much already, and now we had to make the choice, stay and fight, or disappear and start over. I took a deep breath, the weight of everything we had been through pressing down on me. Finally I spoke. "Let's go." The story we had worked so hard to bring to light, everything Daniel had uncovered, didn't go unanswered. It rippled to the corridors of power, leaving a trail of chaos in its wake. As for us, we vanished. The threat was still there lurking, but we had done what we could. We had exposed the truth, even if it meant leaving everything behind. The world was never the same, and neither were we. But in the end, it was the only victory we could claim. The truth had been exposed, and those who were responsible for so many lives lost would never be able to hide again.